Exciting week with Alan Jones, not the racing driver, not the shock jock, but the hero of Woking, London and Sydney, spruiking decentralised energy and green infrastructure and what local governments can do to save the world.
All of a sudden it's like, well, why would you not do it that way? I mean, it's fantastic. It does turn everything upside down. In fact, what it does is it makes you realise what you're doing is not nearly as ambitious as you thought. Because sometimes you feel like you're just making this ambitious case and everyone kind of rolls their eyes every time you try and, push it a bit harder.
Add some green stuff.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's right. I mean, in the context of when I'm just trying to, do minor things.
Yeah.
And then, but then this is such a holistic and quite radical program, but one that also makes economic sense.
Yeah.
But I did have a conversation with the Director of Planning about it already in relation to Knutsford Street today, because we're already we've got to put in all the infrastructure. I mean, one of the key debates we're having around Knutsford Street is developer contributions for infrastructure, for water, power, sewage and the like. And so there's going to be a lot of laying pipes as it is. And this is such a key opportunity to lay those pipes and get that infrastructure in at the same time. The East End is going to be much trickier because we've got, unfortunately, landowners in that area who are much more conservative and have already been pushing hard against even the Green Star. It looks like we've got a compromise, which is some wording that's around best practice and high standard and those kind of things. They get bonuses based on those vague wordings, which for me is a bit frustrating because, well, what does that mean? How do you, how does that then play out? I would have much preferred a rating tool that everybody can agree on, but it's still there, and they have to meet these, world-class best practice to get certain densities. But it certainly that was a bit of a battle. So, the implication of that for Alan Jones's trigen and decentralised energy is it's going to be a hard sell to some of those bigger landowners in the East End to get them to buy into it. Is my view, but then maybe if the economics are there, then and they're simply businessmen, they'll come to the party on that alone.
If we can model the East End and Knutsford Street and demonstrate how technology can actually save money, and those two together, along with the Coburn Coast, fit into one single utility that can manage them, and they become a package. That's the experience in Sydney and London and Woking. You can actually draw the private sector in, and all of a sudden the developers are not the only people there.
That's right. And you bring those three developments together, and you start to looking at populations around that 15 to 20,000 people range, which is a substantial development, and one which you do, so that makes a lot of sense.
So let's see if we can pull that off. That would be
huge.
Real practical stuff and something.
I mean, that would basically make all the brownfield sites, all the new brownfield sites at Fremantle, cutting edge, and that would be extraordinary.
That's a nice way to go into Easter.
Oh, it's very exciting. I must say, there is a real sense of quite a few things starting to come together at the moment.
So what else is going on?
I guess it's at that point now where all the working groups now are starting to roll out their recommendations to council, and they're looking great. Like the economic development working groups, one's out for public consultation at the moment, as is the community development, the strategic city centre sites, which is the key economic one as well, links to the economic development plan quite closely. We've finally reached a semi-consensus around that in terms of all the new building heights and densities for the inner East End.
The strategic sites we're talking about are really the inner East End. This looks really at those key sites, which are Queensgate and the Myer building, coming around the Westgate Mall. Basically all the really ugly, horrible stuff we'd like to see a bulldozer through. The Wool Stores shopping centre where Coles is, and then across the road from that is the car park and what used to be the gas site. And they are all really important sites in our economic future. And the reason they're important is because they don't have heritage on them. They're ugly buildings that we would happily see redeveloped. Now the real big debate in many ways around this is, well, what do we want to see on them? And of course the massive debate that always is in Freo is how big do we want it to be, and what will the community accept? But also how do we line up the yield from those in terms of population, who might live in them, amount of people and office workers in them, and the retail space, along with the key targets the city is trying to meet in terms of its economic development strategy. So these strategies actually cross over.
So the mine one's actually, I mean, it's at that real knife edge as to where it goes. I mean, our view from an economic development perspective is it's important to have people like Myer in town, and then the small shops can feed off Myer really well. Myer apparently keen to stay. In fact, again, this is all confidential at this point, but by the time this is used, it won't be. So what we actually did, we got David Sutcliffe, who used to be the head of the Australian Retailers Association, to go and speak to Myer directly in Melbourne and say, well, what's happening? Because we're getting all these mixed stories of Myer's pulling out, Myer's not. And they're like, well, we want to stay, we're negotiating rent, we want to see the site redeveloped and have a new flash Myer in Fremantle. Fingers crossed that that's able to happen. We're actually preparing a contingency plan, which is that if Luke Saraceni's company goes under and they're forced to sell, we'll buy it and we'll proceed with the development.
All right, well, and the government...
So government office, so again, I've been pushing, so, I mean, last time we spoke, it was looking like it was just lost in this bureaucratic maze. Got on the phone to Simon O'Brien, who's now the Finance Minister and responsible for building management and works, and got him down here. He actually came down to Freo. The process is going to take a little bit longer than we would like in terms of the staging and those kind of things, and we won't really expect a decision on that until towards the end of 2011. But he was very positive, saying, yeah, you're on the list, you're looking highly likely. What we're thinking we're going to do with Point Street now is actually we've got some other office tenants who are really interested, is actually locking them in and getting a private sector office in there. I mean, I guess the interesting controversial issue of the last few weeks, but I feel comfortable about it. We advertise a differential rate, 2 of them. Nightclubs, which is for businesses that are open after 1 at 1 a.m, will pay a different rate because of the nighttime economy, and the city is paying for extra cleaning costs, security costs, and lighting and a whole array of other things, and that we feel like that it's only right those businesses that directly benefit from it should also contribute. So that's been very controversial.
The spew tax.
The vomital spew tax. That's right. Actually, it's interesting. It's come from Tim Gray-Smith is one of the ones who's really pushed it as our youngest councillor, who's kind of. I think a lot of people feel like Fremantle after midnight on the weekends is pretty horrible.
Really Fremantle,
no, and people want to kind of want their city back, and if they can't have their city back, then they at least want someone to pay for the fact that they lose their town. And so
I think it's brave and worth doing.
Yeah, and we've done another one as well, which I even like even more, which is that people who leave their sites undeveloped or in a derelict state pay double rates. This is a classic Freo problem, actually, is that we have a whole lot of landowners who are very wealthy, have no debt on any of their properties, and don't actually need to make money on them, and so have no motivations for even renting things out. They're not even acting like business people anymore, because they're like, oh, we don't care if we rent it or not, because everything's just cream. So we need to be offering disincentives to make sure that these things get rented, and if they're not, then the city at least gets some revenue from it. So I mean that will apply to the wool stores, it will apply to the empty car parks like the Coke and Gas site, and to a range of other properties around town.
Yeah, maybe it'll get the wool stores going.
It will.
It's a kick, didn't it?
Well, we had a very good meeting actually with Marilyn New, who's the owner, yesterday, and John Longley. So we're going to do an interim project for ISAF, for the Sailing Championships, where we're going to see it turn into a major, almost an urban art project.
Whose idea was this, John? Or?
Again, I think it might have actually been Tim or Tim Gray-Smith again, or I forget. I think in many ways these ideas are part of a dialogue between Tim, John and myself, kind of saying, because John came to us going, well, we don't want this to be looking like a bombed out place as a backdrop for the Sailing Championships, and they're putting $25,000 towards making it happen. Marilyn's got a court order to make it happen anyway, so this is a really good way of bringing it all together.
That's a great story. Is that being announced soon?
No, in fact, it only happened yesterday, so it hasn't quite been formalised. But what we can do is we can actually get you to film that project as it unfolds.
That would be fantastic, because it will be a bit of a symbol of the resurrection and regeneration of Fremantle.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's a really, that was hard to get everyone around the table, I tell you. It took my poor PA, I just said, just keep ringing until they agree. Just keep ringing. So we had the ISAF and Australian Centre for Concrete Art and Marilyn New. And anyway, so we got them all around the table, and looks like it's going to happen.
On a personal level, you don't seem too bad, but you've had some bad news about your dad. So.
Yeah, that was bit of a shock yesterday. Yeah, I got a call yesterday evening. My dad had just had some tests. He hasn't been that well, and and they found he's got throat cancer. Yeah, so I hope they think it's probably operable. Like there's not any lymph glands yet or anything. So, but needs to be operated pretty soon, like a pretty big lump at the bottom of his esophagus.
Intimations of mortality always.
So I had that kind of weird sense last night. That kind of shakes the world up a bit. He's a reasonably young, reasonably fit guy, so I think he's a bit shocked by it. So.
Yeah, it goes pretty quickly.
Life.
Life and the opportunity to leave a legacy of some kind. And, it's you're in the thick of yours, so it does highlight the importance of the work you're doing.